This Sunday on Capitol Connection, Speaker Madigan's allies are falling like flies.
I could no longer remain silent about my own mistreatment.
Years and years of complaints about sexual harassment are now breaking out into the open, and the consequences with them. Plus,
Blagojevich is where he belongs, and he should stay where he's at.
Governor Rauner and his rival J.B. Pritzker weigh in on the fate of Rod Blagojevich. And
man, that's going to hurt because China and Mexico are they're two in the top 5 of our exporters. They're our biggest buyers of pork.
First it was China, now it's Mexico taking aim at American pork, bourbon, and steel. Why tariffs may impact the unemployment line. It's all coming up on Capitol Connection.
You're watching Capitol Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
Welcome to Capitol Connection. I'm Mark Maxwell. Speaker Madigan's chief of staff is out of a job. Tim Mapes has been a mainstay in Springfield for decades, both in the House of Representatives and on the campaign trail, running the campaign account for the Democratic Party of Illinois, a close confidant of the Speaker. But now, Speaker Madigan says he called on him to step down after a longtime staffer, Sherry Garrett, in the clerk's office came forward with a long list of accusations. She claims Mapes turned a deaf ear to her own complaints and her observations of sexual harassment in that office.
Because we have a serious and pervasive problem in our state government, and I could no longer remain silent about my own mistreatment. Men and women alike just want to go to work, we want to do our jobs with dignity, and we want to go home at the end of our day. But instead, we have a culture of sexism, harassment, and bullying that creates an incredibly difficult work environment.
Speaker Madigan says he was unaware of any of those complaints. An investigation could ensue. To the campaign trail now, attack ads are making their first appearance since the March primary. Governor Rauner kicking off the fight with this zinger.
Right there on the Senate floor, it's not God bless America, God America. It's not God bless America, God America.
That's pretty darn tough. Blago was really corrupt, and Pritzker seems to be laughing along with some of his intentions, some of his statements, and they're definitely trying to bring Pritzker down to Blago's level.
J.B. Pritzker hit back immediately, featuring a truck driver who was temporarily laid off during the budget impasse, part of a running series they call Rauner Failed Me.
I don't know that Bruce Rauner does think of me. Why would we do it for 4 more years?
It presents a message. I don't think it's a terribly powerful message. Certainly it highlights the fact that the budget limbo over the past couple of years did affect a lot of people.
And he's perhaps the most infamous name in all Illinois politics, but now he wants to go home. Rod Blagojevich had his lawyers file a petition to ask President Trump to officially let him out of prison this week. Both J.B. Pritzker and Governor Rauner weighed in.
Blagojevich's case and behavior has been reviewed by judges, many judges, including Supreme Court, by many legal experts, many attorneys. They've all come to the conclusion that Blagojevich is where he belongs and he should stay where he's at.
Pritzker said that Blagojevich is where he belongs and that President Trump should be focused on more important things. They did not say, though, how long he should be there. Should he fill the full 14-year sentence? Dick Durbin says no. Moving on now to other matters from Congress. President Trump is now feeling the burn from this escalating trade war. Mexico announcing this week it would slap a new tariff of 20% on almost all American imported pork to Mexico. That's a running total of some $3 billion, something the Illinois Pork Producers Association says many farmers may not be able to bear.
If we lose that, the farmer's going to lose their bottom dollar, and they aren't going to be, they're already, prices this year, they're not going to be profitable to keep their farms going to feed their families, but now they're going to lose money. They're probably going to be minuscule differences at the grocery store, but for the farmer himself, it's going to impact the most.
When we come back, 2 State House reporters break down and analyze the top news of the week. Stay with us. And it's time now for our Reporters Roundtable, where we check in with reporters who've been covering the State House and Illinois politics all week. Joining us now is Bernie Schoenberg from the State Journal Register. Good to have you, Bernie.
Nice to be back.
And Raquel Martin from WCIA covering the State House here. A busy week. And who would have thought the week after session was over, we might even have more headlines coming out this week than we did last. There's really a lot to cover. Let's start with this first. Speaker Madigan's right-hand man really forced to resign. Speaker Madigan said he did so at my direction after a woman, Sherry Garrett, came forward with a long list of just sexual harassment complaints that she either observed or encountered personally, and she felt that Tim Mapes essentially shrugged them off, and that when she brought them to him, he didn't do anything about them. That's her story. Now he's out of a job. Let's start here. Who is, to most people watching at home who may not know who Tim Mapes is, a lot of legislators this week are talking about how much power he had and what he really meant. Describe that for us, Bernie. What was Tim Mapes' role here, and what did he do?
Well, often when Speaker Madigan is walking through the halls from meeting to meeting in the State House, Tim Mapes is with him. He's his chief of staff. He's grown in power over time to even become clerk of the House, which usually went to somebody else. And Speaker Madigan's power range includes being chairman of the Democratic Party of Illinois, and Tim Mapes has been executive director of that. So he's clearly a person who organizes, he knows data, he knows who's who, he knows what's what, he knows how to move legislation, and a lot of times, my understanding, not that I regularly go see the speaker or that anybody in the press does, but he's kind of the gatekeeper. So if you want to see the speaker, you talk to Tim Mapes, that kind of thing. He's just always been there. Some people have said, as this has all happened this week, how gruff or tough he can be. He's always been nice to me, but again, you haven't had that kind of a situation where I want something and they're not going to give it to me. Other than if we demand to talk to the speaker, the speaker talks when he wants to. So he's that kind of top aide, and so this is the Me Too movement really brought this on. This is giant because it means we have now come that close to Speaker Madigan, who says, I didn't know of some of these complaints about Tim Mapes himself, and he's gone. 2 years ago, with the same complaints about what was said and what was done, the woman didn't say that she was, there were clearly comments of an inappropriate nature. What's the color of your bra or something? Don't show it when you go to a meeting. Not a smart thing to say. Clearly offensive. Don't know if Tim Mapes 2 years ago, before the Me Too movement, would have lost his job in a few hours, but that's how it's going now after some other examples of this within the Democratic caucus.
It really happened very quickly. On the political side, we saw J.B. Pritzker step in and issue this blanket statement that he should resign, or he should be suspended without pay and be fired. And then maybe within 30 minutes, they quickly come out and inserted this thing, if the allegations are found to be true. I'm paraphrasing, but that was their response. Politically, this has been an issue that really both sides have tried to handle, but what are we seeing? How is this shaping the race of women who are demanding more of a platform in Illinois politics?
Well, definitely you cannot get away with this type of behavior, as Bernie was pointing out. And I know J.B. Pritzker, who has a female running mate and has really campaigned on being pro-woman, he has a lot of responsibility to try to, pull away from this, and which is why, he put out a statement so quickly. He also has donated to the Democratic Party. He's starting this blue wave, and he just recently donated $1 million to the Democratic Party to try to fund Democrats throughout the state to get them on the ballot.
And Tim Mapes ran that account.
Exactly. So he definitely had a lot of pressure on him to take action and try to, separate himself, because obviously Rauner is campaigning on the fact that he is directly tied to this corrupt Madigan regime.
Nobody has accused Mike Madigan of anything personal other than the people around him doing bad things. In the Tim Mapes situation, believe it or not, but he said, the speaker said, and we have no evidence otherwise, that he didn't know about these particular comments made by Tim Mapes or complaints given to Tim Mapes that weren't passed on. So yes, there is a continuing call from some, and some within the Democratic caucus, although not as loudly as others, for independence in this process. And Julie Porter was brought in from the outside, but it was a lawyer from Madigan who called her to ask if she could do this job after being, I think, a prosecutor.
And if the end game is for her to sit down and huddle with Madigan, how independent is that process? Not the person, but the process.
Well, there will be a lot of eyes on this, and if nothing comes of what's been said about Tim Mapes at this point, that would raise its own question. So even politically, I think something has to move forward.
So there are questions as to how this translates into 2018. It appears the Pritzker campaign is trying to get out in front of this. And of course, we really haven't seen any strong allegations yet toward Republicans. I wonder how many of them are sweating it out.
Well, I know the last woman that came forward last week said that this is an issue on both sides. So she kind of alluded to this isn't just a Democrat problem, but still no whistleblowers on that end.
Maybe once this becomes a bipartisan issue, we'll have more people speaking out.
We do have the Ken Duncan factor.
That's true.
Ken Duncan is a former Democratic legislator who really sided with Bruce Rauner on some key issues, then was beaten in the primary badly by Juliana Stratton, who is now Pritzker's running mate. And Ken Duncan, just within the last few weeks, out of a job, was appointed to the Metropolitan Sanitary or Water Reclamation District, the big sanitary water organization.
The very organization that Rauner weeks prior had said it was a patronage job.
That's right. Rauner would have trashed Pat Quinn for making a similar appointment, but he appointed Ken Duncan to the $70,000 a year job just being on this Water Reclamation District board. Now he's calling for Duncan to resign because as part of what came out about Mapes, the woman who complained,
Sherry Garrett, one of her complaints was against Ken Duncan.
Yeah, saying he made a lewd comment to a couple of staffers a couple of years ago, and that, saying, you two come to my house, we'll see who's more fun or the naughtiest. And Duncan has denied saying that to our Doug Finke at our paper, I think, or it was in our paper. On the other hand, Governor Rauner now says that Ken Duncan should resign. Last I heard,
he's not.
He's not resigning. He was going to a meeting, late in the week. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, so Duncan doesn't plan to step down. The governor appointed him. Now the governor's calling for him to resign. He was a Democrat, but sort of a pro-Republican Democrat.
He clearly,
it's not the cleanest shot. If something comes out against a leader in the Republican side, then
that would be cleaner.
It would be
it
might
more
get muddier.
Partisan. Yes.
Yeah, in a strange sense. All right, let's shift over to another big story this week. Rod Blagojevich, the, of course, jailed ex-governor of Illinois, officially his lawyers filed papers this week asking President Trump to let him out of jail early. This is an issue in Illinois where everybody seems to have an opinion. It's not scientific, I will say that, but we did ask our Facebook audience, what do you think? Within about 20 minutes, we had 2,000 votes.
Wow.
At one point, about a day into the process, we had about 6,000 votes. 93% said absolutely not, he should not get out of jail early. 7% said yes, let him go. Right. Those 7% are thoughtful, considerate people who say, look, this was a really steep, stiff penalty, but the 93%, you can't ignore them. They've got a really big axe to grind, and this is a political issue. We saw the reaction from Governor Rauner and from J.B. Pritzker this week. They both said he is where he belongs.
Right. It is generally just kind of the thing in recent years, and it's on and off for 200 years, but more recently with the kind of angry media you get on both sides. Politicians are bad. If he's in jail, must be right. Bad guy. Understood, Rod Blagojevich said horrible things on tape and also did horrible things. He wasn't even, the conviction on, I think it was 19 or 20 counts, included trying to sell Barack Obama's Senate seat. That even got reversed, but other things were
individual
worse.
Conviction was overturned later.
Was overturned, but he still has like 14 or so convictions that stood after review, and they were like shaking down the head of a children's hospital in Chicago for a campaign contribution before he would allow more state funding to go to the hospital. That was clear. That was one of the things he was convicted of, and that's the kind of thing people should look at instead of just the talk. So, on the other hand, Blagojevich will argue he was just doing horse trading. Well, asking for money before you do an official action, even if it's for your campaign, or he was looking for jobs too. That's the kind of thing that is clearly illegal. What you can get for a Senate seat, generally speaking, there are people who trade those things, but he was also looking, trying to get his wife a job from certain organizations, that kind of stuff. So, on the other hand, it's all very weird because now Patty Blagojevich's wife has gone on Fox News, the favorite channel of Donald Trump. Donald Trump, the president, clearly is getting excited about the idea of the power of pardon. He has pardoned some people recently. He seems to want to do more. He's talked about Blagojevich, so it might happen, and that just complicates matters. Blagojevich will get out. He will talk about things that it clearly might hurt Pritzker, but he's a Republican president who would release him, so Rauner may be a little more muted in what he says about Blagojevich. We don't know.
Well, he's running ads right now using Blagojevich's own words and Pritzker. I don't see him necessarily backing down from that. But it is interesting, though, that in his own words, Rod Blagojevich wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal really abandoning any semblance of pretending to have remorse and saying, I was just practicing politics, I did nothing wrong, and really, President Trump's own remarks said he should never have gone to jail in the first place.
Yeah, and Rod Blagojevich talked about remorse at one point when he was trying to get out. Judge Zagel, who put him away for 14 years,
that was in front of the court of law, not the court of public opinion.
Right, it's very different. And Zagel, of course, gave him the 14 years. He's a former director of state police, director of revenue under Jim Thompson. So a lot of kind of familiar names here. Rod Blagojevich has done a media tour around the country before he was sentenced, going on David Letterman and other shows saying how innocent he was. That probably helped the judge decide there is no remorse. It clearly isn't there now. Donald Trump may not care, and we'll see if Rod Blagojevich gets added to the mix this fall.
It would be very interesting to see if the ghost of governors past was a weight hanging around the ghost of, or not the ghost, but the potential and the political ambition of governor's future. We shall see.
Just things can take odd turns in the remaining months before November.
All right, thank you, Raquel and Bernie, for joining us. We're back in a minute with political expert and analyst Kent Redfield, who's going to take a look at some of those nasty political ads.
You're watching Capital Connection from the Illinois State Capitol.
For the first time since the March primary election, we saw television ads for the race for governor back on the airwaves, and you guessed it, they were nasty attack ads. Joining us now to look at the politics of this race is Professor Emeritus of Political Science Kent Redfield from University of Illinois Springfield. Kent, always a pleasure to have you with us.
Good to be here.
Let's start with not just the content, but the fuel behind it, the money. This week we heard J.B. Pritzker sort of boasting to, well, we didn't hear him specifically, but through sources telling reporters, for every $1 Bruce Rauner spends in this race, I'll spend $2. Just set the table for us here. How historic is this race in the sense of all out, just cash on the table, and where does it rank so far in other statewide races we've seen nationwide?
Well, we've already spent $125 million in the primary.
Spent, not just raised.
Spent, yeah, between all of those candidates. The ones for the Democratic side, Rauner and Ives. If you look at cash on hand, it's about 38, 39 million on each side if you add up what they had in the bank plus what they've raised, which is all we know is they've raised money. So we're already above $200 million in terms of if they just spent everything that they've got and didn't raise any more money, they could hit.
Isn't California's record 280?
It's about 215 for the candidates itself. Now,
okay.
It's, it always depends on if you're counting independent expenditures and those sorts of things. But certainly in terms of official committee spending, we're likely to exceed California, no matter however you count it.
We've got 5 months to go, and we're already seeing the floodgates are open.
Yeah.
The attack ads are out there, and there's more of them coming. So let's talk about the content there. We saw Governor Rauner go back to the well of those FBI wiretaps with Rod Blagojevich and J.B. Pritzker having discussions. The first one that he led with was those two mimicking President Obama's controversial former pastor, Jeremiah Wright, who condemned America in this very controversial speech or sermon.
Right.
And that snippet is now all over the airwaves. Effective? Not effective? What do you think?
Certainly it has, if you've not seen the ad, if you didn't see the ad from the primary that dealt with Pritzker talking down about the potential African-American replacements for President Obama, then, that grabs your attention. Now, Pritzker went out on an apology tour, but, now we're running it again, and it's going to get people's attention. It is designed to drive a wedge between Pritzker and the African American vote. It's also intended to fit into a narrative that Pritzker is not a nice person. He's a machine guy. He's a Madigan guy. The governor believes...
He's a Blago guy. They're really using Blago too.
And Blago in this case, and then it'll be Madigan. And Pritzker's strategy is to make, Rauner's strategy is to make Pritzker less acceptable than Rauner.
And that's part of the messaging we saw in the Pritzker attack ad that sort of was the counterpunch, which was, yeah, well, Rauner's not that much better. They had a truck driver talking about how he was temporarily laid off during the budget impasse, but then more recently, just a montage of news clips of less than stellar moments in the Rauner administration, and that seems to be the message from the Pritzker campaign. The two-word slogan, Rauner failed.
Yeah, and which was Quinn failed, was Rauner's campaign. You know, we've got a failed politician. I'm going to come in and I'm going to change things.
And hey, that guy won.
Yeah, and it's about, you know, do you want to go through another 4 years of the last 4 years with no budget, with vets dying at the Quincy nursing home, with all of these problems in state government? So
is there an outsider lane left in this race?
Well, it's going to be just, you know, if you get Sam McCann in there as an independent, he may siphon off some social conservative vote, but it's going to be down and dirty. I mean, you know, you're going to hear some positive ads about how we're going to make things better, but mostly it's about driving up the negatives of your opponent with unlimited money. I mean, this is just, you know, Rauner spent $50 million in the general election against Pat Quinn. We're talking about numbers that could double that.
Maybe even triple. Maybe even
triple.
We'll see.
And if you remember the 2014 election, the Rauner ads were everywhere. It was, you know, shake up Springfield. I mean, they just were constant. And if you double that for two candidates and double it again for money, people are going to be running for cover by the time we get to November.
That's Professor Kent Redfield. What he's saying is brace yourselves because the attack ads are coming, and so is fall. Kent, thanks for joining us.
Oh, certainly.
We're back in a minute. Thanks for watching us here on Capital Connection this week. We'll see you right back, same time next week. You can stay connected all week by following us on Twitter at CapConnectIL and watch reports from our Capitol team on WCIA3. You can also find us on Facebook or IllinoisHomepage.net.